HD. ZNS Network presents The Bahamas Tonight. This portion of the news brought to you by BTC Every Day.
Backtracking on his party's initial position on the constitutional reform bills in the House of Assembly today. Good evening, I'm Candido Knowles.
I'm Kish Latterly. Thanks so much for joining us. Opposition leader Dr. Hubert Minnis said in his contribution to the debate that his party has strong objections to parts of the compendium of gender equality bills.
And as Charisma Robinson tells us, his new position did not sit well with the Right Honorable Prime Minister Perry Christie, who says debate on the bills cannot continue without a unified approach.
It was a heated debate in the House of Assembly as opposition leader Dr. Hubert Minnis gave his contribution to the compendium of gender equality bills. Minnis, who initially said that his party was in support of the bills, had a different story Monday, specifically when it comes to Amendment Bills 2 and 3, which deal with citizenship for husbands of Bahamian women and the elimination of gender discrimination against an unwed Bahamian father, giving him the same right to pass citizenship to his child born out of wedlock.
The goal and objective is equality. But I'm pointing out today that number 2 and 3 need not constitutional changes. Number 2 and 3 can be done by legislation. And that is the recommendation being brought forth. Today, the PLP or the government find themselves in a quagmire of web, complete mess, and trying to pull the opposition in with them.
However, Prime Minister Perry Christie says this cobweb the opposition leader spoke of was never intended to be that way. In fact, he says he made it his business to include the opposition in this process from day one to ensure a unified approach.
With respect to what the leader of the opposition spoke of today, it's almost as if he were not in those meetings and he is not responsible for agreeing to the process that he is a part of initiating. Yeah. And I do not want, because of the authority of his office, his participation to discolor what in fact was firmly committed to, unreservedly committed to, and which ought to be lived up to.
Mr. Christie says the leader of the opposition and the Prime Minister do not have the luxury or even the right to take different approaches to this very serious matter.
As Prime Minister, I took it upon myself, notwithstanding the government's position, to, with the Commission, meet with colleagues of mine who have strong views, and to reassure them that I would give every opportunity for them to make their point, inviting them to put in writing their position. So consideration should be given to it. Tomorrow I meet with religious leaders. This is a country that we all share in.
And this country we all share in, Dr. Minnis says there is no room for mistakes.
We're talking about possible ramification in the future that we may not want. Individuals have certain ideas. All of that needs to be clarified.
The Prime Minister says if there is an issue of doubt that could be resolved as they proceed with this debate, he would be willing to sit down with the opposition leader again to determine whether or not a unified approach can be hammered out for the sake of the Bahamian people. Charisma Robinson, ZNS Network News.
Well, several Progressive Liberal Party MPs have placed on the record of the House their reservations over parts of the compendium of gender equality bills.
Marcos City MP Greg Moss told Parliament today that when it comes to correcting gender inequality, we should be careful not to open doors to new issues which will challenge us as a country in the future. That story tonight from Altavis Munnings.
In his contribution to the constitutional reform bill debate in Parliament Monday, Marcos City MP Greg Moss objected to Bills 2 and 4 of the Gender Equality Compendium, which deal with citizenship for the husbands of Bahamian women and the inclusion of the word sex, eliminating gender discrimination.
And we should not have individuals in this country being able to grant citizenship simply by choosing someone to marry. That makes no sense. And with the greatest respect, it is a false paradigm, a false dilemma to say that the only way to equalize that discrimination under the Constitution is to repeat that discrimination and to compound that error by performing the same error in respect of women that we did in respect of men.
But it was Moss's comments on the inclusion of the word sex in the Constitution that received objection from his colleagues. Moss believes the rewording of that part of the Constitution could open the door to gay marriage.
We should not be about the business of trying to legislate what others would see as progressive legislation to open the door to these unions without the continence of our people and in this way. If we want to have a blunt, open, direct discussion on this by way of statute, or an open discussion on the amendment of the Constitution and the effect it will have, I think we should have this, but not in this way. And in any event, I do not support it.
However, the MP for Central and South Eleuthera, the Honorable Damien Gomez, who played a pivotal role in drafting these bills, dismissed that notion. He has no clue how the issue of sexual orientation crept into this debate in the first place.
The world seems to have been collapsing around us as people are clamoring about gays getting married. But where is this coming from? Our law, as it presently stands, states quite clearly that marriage is an institution between a male and a female. We have not proposed to change that. We haven't even dreamt it up. And yet, it consumes so many people. And I wonder if they are harboring insecurities about their own sexual positions. Because this is a completely irrelevant political discussion. It is just not on. Where is this coming from?
The Legal Affairs State Minister maintains the ultimate goal of amending the Constitution is to institute full equality between men and women. Altaviz Munnings, ZNS Network News.
Well, the fourth bill, which seeks to end discrimination based on sex, seems to be the most controversial, as some believe the amendment could open the door for same-sex marriages, as you just heard there in that report from Altaviz Munnings. But Chairman of the Constitutional Commission, Sean McQueenie, called this idea a red herring, as the word sex has been in the Constitution for over 41 years.
When did you hear anybody stand up over the last 41 years and say that we should have a constitutional amendment to take the word out of Article 15? It's been in 41 years. So why now is this suddenly a problem? Because you want to use that same word and put it in Article 26 of the Constitution. It defies logic.
Now, by inserting the word sex in Article 26 of the Constitution, McQueenie says is all about enshrining the principle of equality between men and women.
I believe that it is an important principle of national life that we should accept and follow and adhere to the principle of equality between men and women. Then, well, yes, that's all it's about. But all of this nonsense about same-sex marriage is a total red herring.
Now, following debate over the proposed constitutional amendments, a coalition of women's rights groups gathered outside the House of Assembly to voice their support for equality between men and women in the Bahamas.
This is an opportunity for us as a country to stand up and for men and women as equals. It's a battle that we've had for many years, and for us in the trenches at the Crisis Center, where we see the silent victims who suffer as a consequence of gender-based discrimination and gender inequality, this is a time for us to make a difference.
The women of the women's suffrage movement in the 40s, 50s, and 60s fought for civil liberties. The civil liberties then were about racial discrimination, the right to vote, the right to stand as a candidate, the right for economic opportunity, the right for educational opportunity. We have many of those in place now. What we do not have in place is equality between women and men and the principle of non-discrimination on the basis of sex. That is what the constitutional amendment is about at this time, and that is what we should be focused on.
In other news this evening, celebrations centered on the Fox Hill Day events may have gone without incident, but the events were marred by a nearby shooting. Those who chose to extend a night of partying at a nearby club found themselves caught up in a dangerous shootout. Clint Watson has the story.
It's It's a sound all too familiar in this community, gunshots ringing out in Fox Hill and screams as nightclub patrons scrabble for their lives. Superintendent of CDU, Paul Rolls, says police were notified of the gunshots and arrived on the scene. That's when persons in the large crowd reportedly opened fire on police. The officers returned fire, however, persons escaped in a vehicle. The latest showed up at the Princess Margaret Hospital. Another man later showed up to hospital with multiple gunshot wounds. He claimed he was shot some distance away from this ordeal. He's now in critical condition. Now police are holding the injured men believed to be responsible for this morning's incident. Area MP Fred Mitchell says the festival itself was well policed and without incident, but there are obvious challenges that the community is dealing with following the December tragedy in which 4 people were killed.
I think emotions are still quite raw. I mean, as you know, when we had the groundbreaking on Wednesday, that it just brought it all back up again, and people were simply quite distraught. I'm really just trying to see whether we can keep a lid on any future violence. And secondly, that we can get this monument built, because once it's built, I think that puts a cap on some of the expressions and the raw emotions. And we can then go on to construct a stronger community.
Festival committee member Maurice Tyne says Fox Hill Day was a success, from all indications with thousands turning out, although he believes there may have been some apprehension.
I think the violence of a few two before the Fox Hill Day may have given people some concern for coming in Fox Hill. I'm sure it did. But overall, I don't think it affected the overall numbers of people. But I'm sure there are one or two persons who would have stayed away because of that.
Clint Watson, ZNS Network News.
Also live tonight, police are investigating the theft of a huge sum of government money from Mayaguana's top official. The Monday robbery was the third such incident involving Family Island administrators in the southern Bahamas. In 2010 and 2011, more than $500,000 collectively was stolen from the administrator on nearby Acklands Island. And as Janaea Noel Ferguson tells us tonight, the government is proposing a change in the way it does business in the Family Islands.
Police officers are in Mayaguana investigating the alleged abduction and armed robbery of the island's administrator, Charles Moss. On Monday, Moss was tied up and robbed of a substantial amount of money. Area MP V. Alfred Gray says this incident is becoming too familiar for administrators in the southern Bahamas.
I see a trend developing, and my obligation as minister is to, first of all, look out for the welfare of the administrators. And to that end, I propose to present to Cabinet a paper for consideration that wherever we have these cash districts, that we turn them into banking districts, so that the Bank of the Bahamas, that we can speak to as the Bahamas government bank, so to speak, be allowed to go in twice a week or once once every 2 weeks to conduct financial businesses on behalf of the government.
Now, just 2 weeks ago, explosives were placed on the runway in Mayaguana. Gray says he's concerned about the developing criminal element on that island and is seeking additional security. Janaea Noel Ferguson, ZNS Network News.
Well, still to come tonight, hear the Bar Association on the plot problem in Sir Lyndon Pinling Estates.
And then in sports, highlights from the Summer of Thunder. You're watching The Bahamas Tonight live.
This segment of the news is brought to you by Shell Quality Fuels.